Shkoyach. Today's daf yomi is Menachos daf nun vav. Menachos 56. Today's daf yomi. We're going to start on nun vav amar aleph 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines from the top. We would like to thank our hosts, Seth and Emily Gertzberg, and this is with Jonah and his basketball team, Ben Polat Yosef, that they're their championship Sunday, and we know they're going to be victorious as long as they let Jonah shoot.
Amen.
Jonah never passed that ball. Don't pass that ball, Jonah. You're the best. Okay, so this is going on the YouTube. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel and see it all. So today's daf yomi, the Gemara is going to start by discussing. They want to know, what does it mean when it says about the goat of the Nasi, after Nasi sins, when a Nasi sins, he has to bring a carbon chatos, and it says v'shachat oso, you shall slaughter it. So the Gemara says, what do we darshan from that word it? So the Gemara is going to give several suggestions of what we learn out from the word it. Ella oso ta'un safon. Maybe the goat of the Nasi is required to be in the north, meaning say you have to slaughter it in the northern part of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Ve'ein hashochet omei b'tzafon. But the one who does the actual shchita, he doesn't need to stand in the north. The goat needs to be in the north, but the guy who slaughters it can be in the south. Well, how can he be in the south if the animal's in the north? He has a very long knife. And he stretches out the knife, and he could stand outside. Maybe that's what the word oso teaches us. The Gemara says, no, that can't be, because that idea we already know, mid Rabbi Achya nafka. We already learned that from Rabbi Achya. Tanya Rabbi Achya Omer. He taught in a brisa, v'shachat oso al yerach hamizbeach tzafona. It says you slaughter the korban olah next to the altar in the north. Matam Omer. What is it teaching us there? We know that the one who receives the blood, she'omei b'tzafon u'mekabel b'tzafon, the one who receives the blood, that's called the Kabbalah. He's supposed to stand in the north and receive the blood in the north. If he stood in the south and received it in the north, pasul, it's going to be disqualified. Yacho afsakin. I might also think that the one who slaughters the goat of the Nasi also has to stand in the north. Tamomer oso b'tzafon lo ashochet tzarich omei b'tzafon. So this idea that the one who slaughters the carbon does not have to stand in the north, we already learned that out from a different pasuk. So it's not from this pasuk by the goat of the Nasi. So Ella, maybe it's coming to teach us a second attempt. Oso b'tzafon ve'im ben of b'tzafon. When you slaughter the goat of the Nasi, you have to stand in the north. But when you do the bird, when you kill the bird, how do you kill the bird for a carbon? Anybody know? With your thumb. It's called malika. So maybe the one who does malika doesn't need to be in the north. The goat needs to be in north. So that's what it's teaching us, but not the bird. That could be done even in the south. You might have thought that this idea could be derived from a kal v'chomer mi ben son, from a sheep. Ma ben son shelo kavalo kohen. Just like a sheep, anybody could slaughter a sheep as a carbon. You don't need a kohen. Kavalo tzafon needs to be in the north. Ben oaf shekavalo kohen, a bird which requires a kohen. Eino din shenikvalo tzafon. For sure, it should require the north. Gemara says, no, we would never have thought that. Why? Mala ben son shekin kavalo kli. You can't learn how to kal v'chomer from a sheep because a sheep requires a knife, whereas a bird doesn't. Ella, so a third possibility. Also b'tzafon, ve'im pesach b'tzafon. The goat needs to be in the north, but a carbon pesach does not need to be in the north. So the Gemara says the carbon pesach, the idea that doesn't need to be in the north, we already know that from a different source. From Rebbe Lezer ben Yaakov, the Tanya Rebbe Lezer ben Yaakov Omer, Yachol Yeya Pesach Tafam Mitzafan. I might think the carbon pesach requires the north. Vidinhu, and it's a logical argument. Ma ola shelo kavla zman b'shchitasa kavla tzafan. A carbon ola, which doesn't have to be done at a specific time, requires a north. Pesach shekavla, a Pesach which has to be done at a specific time. What time does the carbon Pesach have to be done at? Anybody know? The eve of Pesach, after Chatzos. Carbon Pesach shekavla zman l'shchitasa eino din shekavla tzafan. For sure, it should require the north. So therefore, we need a pasuk to tell us it doesn't require the north. The Gemara says, what kind of kal v'chomer is that? Mala ola shekin kalil. You can't learn out from a carbon pesach, a kavachomer from an ola, because an ola is more severe because it's entirely burned. Well, maybe from a chatas. You can't learn out a kavachomer from a chatas. It came in kaparas. A chatas is a sin offering. It provides kapara, atonement. So the Gemara, al chayve krisos. So the Gemara says, May Hashem. What about from an Hashem? Mal Hashem shkein kachi kachim mikulu nami. No, shekain kachi kachim. Elul olam kedam reina mekar. So the Gemara says, let's go back to what we said initially. What do we say initially? Oso b'tzafon. What do we learn from an oso? That it's in the north. Ve'ein hashochet b'tzafon. But the one who slaughters the carbon doesn't have to stand in the north. With the kakashi achmi the Rabbi Achya. Maybe we should have learned this out from Rabbi Achya. The Gemara says, no, we wouldn't learn it out from there. The Rabbi Achya. The teaching of Rabbi Achya is not to exclude it's not to tell us that the shochet doesn't need to be in the north. This is what Rabbi Achya is teaching us. The slaughter doesn't have to be in the north. But the one who receives the blood does have to be in the north. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? That's learned out from a different verse. It says, no, he didn't learn that out. Okay, so now the next piece is you're liable for making chametz. Okay, the carbon, all the carbonos in the base of mikdash were not allowed to be chametz except for two: carbon toda, which is a Thanksgiving offering, and the 2 loaves of bread on Shavuot, shtei lechem. But you're not only in violation if you bake it, but you're also in violation if you do all the things associated with chametz: the kneading, that's called the lisha, the arichasa, the forming it into dough, and afiyasa, the baking. So now. Says Amar Papa, Afa Lokeshtayim. If you bake it, you're going to be liable for how many violations of the Torah if you bake it? 2. You might think I'm just doing one thing, but you're really doing 2 things. Achas al harichasa, achas al afiyasa. You're liable for the baking, but also for the shaping, because when you bake it, you're kind of shaping it too, because you're like completing the shaping. So the Gemara says, "V'amris," but didn't you say ma'afia miyuchedes she ma'isi yachidi v'chayev and b'fnei atzma? But doesn't it say in our Mishnah that baking is just one action? The Gemara says, okay, this is what we mean. Lokasha hada arachu v'afahu. If he baked it and he formed it himself, he's only liable for 2: one for the forming, one for the baking. But if his friend baked it, formed it, and he baked it, then he's going to be liable for 2 for the baking. 1 for baking and 1 for the forming, even though his friend is also chayiv for the forming. So the Gemara says, now we have the following teaching. Okay, so this is actually an interesting question that's going to arise. The basic point here is, let's say you have a firstborn animal, so that you have to give that firstborn animal to the Kohen. Now the Kohen has to bring it as a carbon, unless it gets a blemish. If it has a blemish called a mum. If it gets a blemish, then the Kohen is allowed to kill it on his own and eat it outside the base of mikdash. It's worth more money. He doesn't, because especially when there's no base of mikdash, he can't do anything with it. So he wants it to get a blemish. But you're not allowed to make a blemish on the animal. If you do that, you're in violation of the Torah. So let's say the animal has something wrong with it, and in order to save its life, you need to make a blemish on it. So would the Kohen be allowed to make a blemish on it? You follow that question? No, right? So you're not allowed to make a blemish on the animal. That's a violation of the Torah. But let's say you need to make a blemish in order to save the animal's life. So would you be allowed to make that blemish? That's what the Gemara is discussing now. Bechor, let's say the firstborn animal, sha'achazodam, it's blood clotted. So the treatment for that was what's called bloodletting. You let out some of the blood, but that makes a blemish. So are you allowed to do it? Bechor sha'achazodam, you have this firstborn animal whose blood clotted. Makizin oso adam. So then the first approach is you have to let out the blood, but makom shein osim bomum. You can only do it if it's not making a blemish, even though you're saving the life of the animal. The makizin es adam, the makom sheosim bomum. But you can't do it. You can't do this bloodletting, even though you're saving the life in a place where it makes a blemish. That's the first opinion. That's Rabbi Meir. Chachamim say yalkiz after makom sheosim bomum. Since you're helping the animal, you could let out the blood, even though that's going to make a blemish, but you can't kill the animal as a result of that mum. You need a different mum. Yeah, Max.
You're allowed to give the animal as a korban, even though it has a slight burn, like thing on it.
If it has the life-threatening thing, We're not talking about giving it as a carbon. They can't give the carbon. We're talking about because, let's say, whatever reason, they wanted to have a blemish on it so we could eat it. Because even though you can't bring it as a carbon, you can't eat it until it gets a blemish.
It's not considered a blemish that
That's what makes it a treifa. No, this wouldn't make it a treifa, but you'll be able to shecht it. But you're saying that if it has this, you can't shecht it on that mum that you make. You need another one. You need an additional mum. Rabbi Shimon Omer, third approach, he says, we're on top of Num Vavam base, you can even kill the animal as a result of that blemish. So because once there's a blemish, it's a blemish. Fourth approach, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu meis ein makizin lo asadam. Even if the animal's going to die, we're not going to let you make a blemish because then, everybody's going to be, everybody knows the Jews, they're going to come up with all these kunzes, say, oh, I had to do it. I had to make a blemish in order to save the animal's life. So now we have these four opinions. Amr B'chir bar Abba, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. So now the Gemara is going to compare this. What?
Next question really was the mum that it had.
Yeah.
The bloodletting.
That doesn't make
If
it a treifa.
made it not able to be automatically, but made it not able to be a carbon, then isn't it right away available to it? You don't have to make the mum.
So that wasn't a mum that would make it a carbon, but it would make it.
You can't be a carbon with the mum.
No, but that wouldn't disqualify it as a carbon. But eventually it would die. So you have to save it, and the way you would save the treatment for that would make it a mum. See, I already see where you're going. That the Kohen can't. The rabbis were on top of that. The Kohen can't say somebody else to do it. The rabbis were watching that, Jonah. I see how your mind works. It's very clever, but it's no. The rabbis are watching that.
They couldn't bring it as but it was the mum the thing that wouldn't let it be a carbon.
Yeah, not the treatment. The fact that the blood was gathering, that in and of itself wouldn't disqualify it as a carbon. Let's say there's no base of mikdash. There, he can't bring it as a carbon. That's the point. There's no base of mikdash. He can't bring it as a carbon, but he can't eat it yet until it gets a blemish. And that's why he wanted it to have a blemish. But so now the Gemara is going to connect this to chametz. So let's say let's say you have flour and water and it becomes chametz. So that's a prohibition. And now somebody else bakes it. Is that person also in violation of prohibition? It was already chametz. So everybody says that if you have chametz and then you make it more chametz, you're going to be chayev. It's two separate prohibitions. And so to the Mesaris Achar Mesaris. Mesaris is neutered. You know what neutered is? You know what that is, Luria? Basically, you chop off like the parts of the animal that are involved in reproduction, but you don't do a full chop off, and then you do another chop off after that. So you're not allowed to chop that off of the animal, but let you do a second one, you're in violation of a second prohibition. Mesaris Achar Mesaris Shuchayev. D'chsev Moch Chasus V'Natuk L'Karus. So even if you chop off some part after it's already chopped off, you're chayev again. The only question is, if the animal already has a blemish, are you chayev for making another blemish? Rabbi Meir Savar.
Why do you need it?
That's the point. So you don't need another blemish, so maybe you're not chayev. But you don't need it in any of these cases. Rameir says, Kol mum lo yebo. You can't do it at all. And that's why even though it already has a blemish, you're still going to be chayev. The Rabbanan Savri, Tamim Yel Ratzon. The rabbis are of the position, Tamim Yel Ratzon, meaning to say only if it's Tamim is there a prohibition to make a blemish. But if it's not Tamim, there's no chiyuv. The Gemara says, Rameir Nami Yoksiv Tamim Yel Ratzon. Doesn't Rameir also say Tamim Ratzon? The Gemara says, no, Ha'ul Miute Balmume Kara. That's to tell us that if it was born with a blemish, it's not chayev. The Gemara says, well, if it's born with a blemish, Balmume Kara, Dikla Balmu, that's just a tree. Of course you're not chayev for that. So it's to tell us that you're not chayev if it's something that was disqualified after it was redeemed and you make a blemish on it. This was just an animal that was disqualified in the base of mikdash, and then you redeemed it. You're not, typically speaking, not allowed to make a blemish on a carbon, but once it was redeemed, you can. You might have thought, an animal that was a carbon and then was redeemed, you still can't use it for work or shear its wool. You might have thought you also can't make a mum on it. When you can. How come the rabbis let you make a blemish? Doesn't it say kol mum yebo? Only the rabbis say it to mean kol mum yabo en yabo mum. The rabbis say it to teach us that you can't. This is Jonah. This was like something that was going down your mind. How do you know you can't allow a blemish to be caused by others? How do you know? You say, okay, I'm not going to cause a blemish on this animal, but you know what I'll do? I'll just put a piece of dough on its ear and have my Doberman jump up and grab it, and that'll nick the ear, which will be a blemish. How do you know you can't do that? Like passively cause it? How do you know I can't put a piece of dough on the ear and then the dog will come along and bite the dough and nick the ear? Tell him, that it can't be allowed. Yeah.
So before the plan get done, would the owner that there's a third person make a blemish on it before?
So that is what basically how we get out of it today, because today we have this problem. So today, anytime there's an animal which is about to be born, which is firstborn, you always have to have a partner, and one of the partners is not a Kohen, or one of the partners is because you have to give your firstborn animal to the Kohen. So what you do today is you have a non-Jewish partner, and that way you don't have to give anything to the Kohen because it's owned by a non-Jew. That's Jonah. You have the makings of either a great rabbi or a great businessman or both. But you already started. So what? Oh well, they're all connected. So I'm a Rabbi Ami. I just want to say this last line on the daf. He niach the oral gabi isa. Let's say you put a piece of seor is sourdough. You know what sourdough is? They didn't sell yeast in the stores then, so the way they made chametz was they had this sourdough, which was basically yeasty dough, and then they put it with dough and it made a chametz. So let's say you just left it there. You just put the sourdough on the dough, and v'holach v'yashevlo, and he just went sit on his on his beach, and you're liable. Chametz is something that you're liable for passivity by just sitting there, and it happens on its own. You're chayiv. That's what we were saying before. Chametz, you're chayiv for passivity. Matzah represents active. Anyway, that's today's daf. A big shkoyach to everybody. Today's daf shkoyach.
Thank you.